We're back. Before we get started, again, this is part 5. Please don't be disingenuous. Don't forget to subscribe. Smash that bell button. And please have an open mind that you be able to receive this sage advice and paramount morals of the story. We would love to hear your comments. Don't forget to leave a comment down below. And don't forget to watch the full video from beginning to end so you don't miss a single detail. I want to say some copyright disclaimers. I have no legal rights to the music videos that you may hear. And viewer discretion is advised. And parental advisory is advised. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107. Allowances is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news report, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is committed by copyright status and might otherwise be infringed, non-profit, educational, personal use, tips to violence in favor of fair use. Enjoy.
Power on. Bluetooth connected. Hunger is the easiest way to eat healthy. At the time. To give you an idea of how rich they were, in 1910, these 6 men represented a quarter of the world's worth. The bankers told the American public that the purpose of to stabilize the economy and to stop the street banks. The guys who wrote the bill were the very same people they said they would stop. If they succeeded, it will give a small group of men the ability to create money from nothing and loan it to the American government with interest. So why was it done in secret? Because the American people didn't want a central bank. Back then, unlike today, people knew what central banks were and understood them very well. Everywhere a central bank went, there'll be wealth inequality, wild swings between economic booms and busts, and after each bust, those at the top of society mysteriously came out richer while everyone else got poorer. Europe was the running example of this at the time. The Federal Reserve was originally drafted as the Aldrich Bill, but when it came into Congress, they recognized Senator Aldrich's name, and it's not a rat. The bankers needed better cover. They decided to send 2 millionaire friends to carry the bill to quell the suspicions of Congress and renamed it the Federal Reserve Act. Next, in a textbook lesson of deceit, the bankers set out to fool the American people through disinformation. In the newspapers of the day, the bankers screamed and protested against the new Federal Reserve Bill. It would ruin the banks, they exclaimed. The average person read the protesting articles of the bankers and thought to themselves, if the bankers hate it, it must be good. And then they ended up unknowingly supporting a Trojan horse. The bankers also fooled Congress by putting clauses in the bill that limited their power only to remove them once the bill was passed. A double head fake of the public and Congress was all it took. The bill was passed on December 23, 1913, while most of Congress was out on holiday. And with that, a small group had complete monopoly over the issuing and creation of American money. Today, the Federal Reserve is the most powerful entity in the United States, and they're not ashamed to admit it either. Here's former Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan.
What should be the proper relationship between the Fed and a President of the United States?
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take. What the relationships are don't frankly matter.
In addition to this, it seems that the Fed can't even be touched by investigating parties.
So I'm asking you if your agency has, in fact, according to Bloomberg, extended $9 trillion in credit, which, by the way, works out to $30,000 to every single man, woman, and child in this country. I'd like to know, if you're not responsible for investigating that, who is?
We have responsibility for the Federal Reserve's programs and operations audits, to conduct audits and investigations in that area. In terms of who's responsible for investigating, would you mind repeating the question one more time?
Mr. Chairman, my time is up, but I have to tell you honestly, I am shocked to find out that nobody at the Federal Reserve, including the Inspector General, is keeping track of this.
So what does all of this have to do with me, you might be asking? I don't even live in the US. Well, 2 reasons. Number 1, the central banking model from the Bank of England and the United States has now been put in all countries, and even consolidated power in parts of Europe as the European Central Bank, or ECB. This unites separate countries under one economic policy. The only places in the world that don't have central banks are North Korea, Iran, and Cuba. In 2000, this list suspiciously included Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya. And number 2, since the end of World War II, the US dollar has been the reserve currency of the world. This means that all central banks hold US dollars in their reserves. In other words, all other currencies are backed by the US dollar. This directly links your country to the Federal Reserve's monetary policy in America. More on this later. When the post-World War II monetary system, called the Bretton Woods system, was created, all US dollars were backed by and exchangeable for gold. A byproduct of this was that currencies used to be very stable in relation to each other.
Before that, all the countries, the exchange rates were fixed, and year after year you could predict what prices were going to be. You could start a business elsewhere, know if you could calculate profits. Business was much, much easier before floating exchange rates.
Unfortunately, in 1971, due to a falling US dollar, international capital flows into gold, and the funding of the Vietnam War, President Nixon took the US dollar off the gold standard.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold.
You want to make money in real estate? Here's how you take
Because you see, in this new economy, pay the bearer in gold. Your paper note used to be transferable to gold. And it was even like that until 1971. It was still partially transferable. You put it in only to take it in your own home. So how did we get to this place where nobody's able to save money?
Do you know what really pisses me off? Back in 2008, this $20 bill could buy you 4-foot-long BMT subs from Subway. And now in 2025, this $20 bill can only buy you only one. Can someone please tell me how that is possible?
That the world had changed. Let me tell you a quick little story that has nothing and everything to do with the future of our world and how you fit into it. In 1970,
level, even in your own home. People have gone to college and amassed student debt. Let's be transparent for a moment. You did everything your parents told you. You went to school. You got a good job. You went to college, some of you, and you came out with student loans and debt up to your eyeballs. You did everything you could, and you try to save, but you put that paper money in a paper savings account, and I was a mortgage banker. I used to watch people every Friday line up outside the door and put some of their money in their checking account and some of their money in their savings account. But it really wasn't a savings account. It's called a put and take account. You put it in only to take it back out when you run out of month because you've got more month at the end of your money. It's not your fault. It's because the paper money system is a false money system. But who taught us about money? Where'd you learn what you knew about money? See, most of us didn't even know that money used to be backed by gold. As a matter of fact, that paper stuff in your pocket is not even money. Because by the true sevenfold definition of money, it has to be a store of value. If you have $100 today, will it buy it to 10 years from now what it buys today? Yes or no? Oh. You see, in 1913, the $50 note used to literally say, pay to the bearer $50 in gold coin. I was a mortgage banker for 15 years, and I had no clue that money used to literally say, pay the bearer in gold. Your paper note used to be transferable to gold. And it was even like that until 1971. It was still partially transferable to gold. And then Richard Nixon, I know people give him a hard time, and they used to call him like Tricky Dick Nixon, but give the man a break. He's the president of the United States. He's not the ruler of the free world. He's not the guy who's calling the shots.
I emphasize again.
On Earth at the time. To give you an idea of how rich they were, in 1910, these 6 men represented a quarter of the world's worth. The bankers told the American public that the purpose of the system was to stabilize the economy and to stop the grip of the Wall Street banks over America. The problem was, the guys that wrote the bill were the very same people they said they'd stop. If they succeeded, it will give a small group of men the ability to create money from nothing and loan it to the American government with interest. So why was it done in secret? Because the American people didn't want a central bank. Back then, unlike today, people knew what central banks were and understood them very well. Everywhere a central bank went, there'll be wealth inequality, wild swings between economic booms and busts, and after each bust, those at the top of society mysteriously came out richer while everyone else got poorer.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's see can I clearly communicate this message this evening. They got together in 1913 on a little island outside of Georgia called Jekyll Island. These were the richest people in the world. And they conspired and they designed a plan to control the entire world through finance, to control and enslave and dominate this entire planet through finances. And understand there were families in Europe who've been doing this for the last 400, 500 years anyway, and they understood that if you can control a country's finances, it matters not who makes the laws. Rothschild himself is quoted as saying, let me control a country's finances, and it does not matter. Let me control their money, and I don't care who makes the laws. And so they conspired with a group of wealthy families in this country and in Europe to put together a plan to control the finances of this country and enslave and dominate the entire population. They created in 1913 the Federal Reserve System. Okay, so they could put this manipulation process in place. They realized they could create and print money out of thin air. They've been trying to do this for years, but in 1913, they finally implemented the plan. They found a secret meeting now. You understand? It was so secret, when they went down to Georgia, when they identified themselves, when they were on a train trip, it was secret. They knew what they were doing. This is a conspiracy. It's not me talking. It was a conspiracy of the highest order. Okay? And they understood that if they can create this Federal Reserve, put it in place, and make people think it's a bank, owned by the federal government, they can print money out of thin air, and every time they print money and sell it to the government of the United States, they can charge an interest for that money, and that interest on that money will be paid to their families for generations. And they would to maintain control and keep control of the country's wealth in the top 1%, which they've done for over 100 years. Now, how do they go about implementing this plan? They say, well, we got to figure out how do we go about implementing this plan? First, we create the Federal Reserve. Okay? We convince everyone. We must convince everyone. Because, see, 100 plus years ago, people knew that gold was money and paper was paper. So they had to go about convincing everyone that paper is now money and gold is a commodity. Plan number 2. They said we got to put an indoctrination system in place. How do we put an indoctrination system in place that'll last for generations? We create a free educational system. They create a free educational system. What do we teach the kids? We teach them what we want to teach them. But we teach our kids something different, but we teach the majority of the population what we want to teach them. We teach them that paper is money, not gold. We teach them that it's better to have a job and not a business. We teach them it's better to have a job and not be in free enterprise and not take control of your life. We teach them it's better to have a job so we can now collect taxes. Wait a minute. We got to put the tax system in place. The exact same year as Mark 5 just told us. When was the federal tax system put in place? 1913, the same year the Federal Reserve was done. What do we do with the tax system? We take the money first, and then we give them back, and we got to convince them we're doing them a favor, but we're going to take their money first, we'll give it back to them in the form of refund. Thank you for the interest-free loan. And then, wait a minute, we can also steal their money through inflation without them even understanding that their wealth is being taken every single month as we deplete the value of the dollar. And by the time the average person figure out what's going on, they're 65 or they're dead. And the plan came into full effect and really go back to World War II. Because not only did they say we now for the dollar, we want to make the dollar the world reserve currency for every single country on the planet pretty much has half of the dollar. And this is how we take the dollar, our families get wealthy and wealthy and wealthy. Just by printing this dollar, it is $1.4 trillion paper currency. That creature was created, and it kept the wealthy in place for the last 100 years.
In 1910, these 6 men represented a quarter of the world's wealth. The bankers told the American public that the purpose of the system was to stabilize the economy and to stop the grip of the Wall Street banks over America. The problem was, the guys that wrote the bill were the very same people they said they'd stop. If they succeeded, it would give a small group of men the ability to create money from nothing and loan it to the American government with interest. So why was it done in secret? Because the American people didn't want a central bank. Back then, unlike today, people knew what central banks were and understood them very well. Everywhere a central bank went, there'll be wealth inequality, wild swings between economic booms and busts, and after each bust, those in the top of society mysteriously came out richer while everyone else got poorer. Europe was the running example of this at the time. The Federal Reserve was originally drafted as the Aldrich Bill, but when it came into Congress, they recognized Senator Aldrich's name and smelt a rat. The bankers needed better cover. They decided to send 2 million airplanes to carry the bill to the discussions of Congress and renamed it the Federal Reserve Act. Next, in textbook lesson of deceit, the bankers set out to fool the American people through disinformation. In the newspapers of the day, the bankers screamed protesting against the Federal Reserve Bill, even more than the banks, they explained. The average person read the protesting articles of the bankers and thought to themselves, if the bankers hate it, it must be good. And then they ended up unknowingly supporting a Trojan horse. The bankers also fooled Congress by putting clauses in the bill that limited their power only to remove them once the bill was passed. A double head fake of the public and Congress was all it took. The bill was passed on December 23rd, 1913, while most of Congress was out on holiday. And with that, a small group had complete monopoly over the issuing and creation of American money. Today, the Federal Reserve is the most powerful entity in the United States, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. This former Fed chairman, Alan Greenspan.
What should be the proper relationship between a chairman of the Fed and a president of the United States?
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency. And it's basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take. What relationships so often?
Alan Greenspan.
What should be the proper relationship between a chairman of the Fed and a president of the United States?
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take. What the relationships are, don't frankly matter.
In addition to this, it seems that the Fed can't even be touched by investigating parties.
So I'm asking you if your agency has, in fact, Bloomberg makes $9 million in credit, which, by the way, works out to $30,000 for every single man, woman, and child in this country. I'd like to know if you're responsible for investigating that, who is?
Responsibility for the Federal Reserve's programs and operation audits to conduct audits and investigations in that area. In terms of who's responsible for investigating, would you mind repeating the question one more time?
Mr. Chairman, my time is up, but I have to tell you honestly, I am shocked to find out that nobody at the Federal Reserve, including the Inspector General, is keeping track of this.
So what does all of this have to do with me, you might be asking? I don't even live in the US. Well, two reasons. Number one, the central banking model from the Bank of England and the United States has now been put in all countries, and even consolidated power in parts of Europe as the European Central Bank, or ECB. This unites separate countries under one economic policy. The only places in the world that don't have central banks are North Korea, Iran, and Cuba. In 2000, this list suspiciously included Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya. And number two, since the end of World War II, the US dollar has been the reserve currency of the world. This means that all central banks hold US dollars in their reserves. In other words, all other currencies are backed by the US dollar. This directly links your country to the Federal Reserve's monetary policy in America. More on this later. When the post-World War II monetary system, called the Bretton Woods system, was created, all US dollars were backed by and exchangeable for gold. A byproduct of this was that currencies used to be very stable in relation to each other.
For that, all the countries, the exchange rates were fixed, and year after year you could predict what prices were going to be. You could start a business elsewhere, know if you could calculate profits. Business was much, much easier before floating exchange rates.
Did you know the average starting
Unfortunately, in 1971, due to a falling US dollar, international capital flows into gold, and the funding of the Vietnam War, President Nixon took the US dollar off the gold standard.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
Now the dollar is floating and backed by nothing, and has been ever since. Okay, so let's think a little. If the US dollar is backed by nothing, but the world's reserves are backed by the US dollar, intrinsically, since 1971, doesn't this mean that all currencies are now backed by nothing tangible, only trust in the American government? Well, this is correct. Money backed by nothing is known as fiat currency. Fiat in Latin means let it be done. In other words, the government says it is money, so it is. A consequence to having money backed by nothing is that whenever the Federal Reserve creates money, it dilutes the currency supply of all other nations because their reserves are backed by the US dollar. All countries' reserves are worth less each time money is created. In the past few years, The Federal Reserve has printed trillions of dollars, and countries like Russia and China have noticed this. As a reaction to the money printing, these countries have been selling US dollar reserves and buying gold over the same period. But wait a second. Some of you clever thinkers out there may have asked yourself, if every currency on Earth is backed by nothing, how am I able to pay for things? Well, as it turns out, the whole economic system today is running because it's backed by faith. Faith that you can exchange your unit of currency for goods or services. In a way, part of that faith comes from the fact that not many people actually know where money comes from. We're about to find that out in this video. A central bank is essentially the entity that manages a nation's money supply, and it can loan money to the government with interest. In the United States and most other countries, it works like this. When the government needs more money than they receive from taxes, they ask the Treasury Department for money. The Treasury then receives an IOU or bond from the government. The Treasury, through the banks, gives this IOU to the Federal Reserve. The Fed then writes a check for this IOU and hands it to the banks. At this exchange at the banks, money is created and it can be used to pay government bills. So hang on, where does the Fed get the money to be able to write this check? They get this money from nowhere. They literally just invent it. Here's a quote from the Boston Federal Reserve. Quote, "When you or I write a check, there must be sufficient funds in our account to cover the check. But when the Federal Reserve writes a check, there is no bank deposit on which that check is drawn. When the Federal Reserve writes a check, it is creating money." End quote. So in essence, they're writing a check and creating money from an account that has no money in it. The money the Federal Reserve creates can be used as legal tender to buy things and eventually makes its way into the real economy. If you and I did that, we'd go to jail for sure, but they can do it because they invented the system. This is the same system used throughout the world today. Another part of this money creation happens at the commercial bank side. Every time you take out a loan to buy a house, car, or TV, banks create money out of nowhere to give you this loan, and you still have to pay interest on it. And don't just believe me when I say them. Hear it for yourself from the horse's mouth, the people running the system. Graham Towers, former governor of the Central Bank of Canada, states, quote, "Each and every time a bank makes a loan, new credit is created, new deposits, brand new money." End quote. Paul Tucker, Deputy Governor of the Bank of England, quote, "Banks extend credit by simply increasing borrowing customers' current accounts." End quote. So what they're basically saying is that each time the bank makes a loan, the bank doesn't use other people's deposited money and give it to you. It creates new money. In modern times, this means typing digits into a computer. 97% of all money is digitally created like this. Only 3% is the physical cash and coins that we carry. Another crazy thing that commercial banks can do is lend out 10 times more money than they actually have in reserves. This is called fractional reserve lending. So who wrote this ridiculous system into law? For the United States, it was part of the Federal Reserve System drafted in 1913. And again, this is the same system used throughout the world. So what's the issue? Why should I even care? Well, there's consequences. When more loans are given out, more money is created, and the rest of the money in circulation is worth less and less as the years go on. This is known as inflation. In a way, inflation is basically a tax that we all pay for the fraud of money printing. We give money now in exchange for tax on our future generations. It's also why in 1950, a house used to cost $7,000 and a car, $2,000. Obviously, this is no longer the same today. Things will always keep getting more expensive as long as this system is in place. This was actually kind of okay because wages grew in relation to inflation until about 2008. Why this stopped happening is a story for another day. So things are already pretty crazy, but they get even crazier. The more you look into it, the stranger things become. So remember how we're talking about how central banks and commercial banks can create money out of nothing? This procedure actually does create something. It creates debt. Let me explain. When you take out a loan, it's written down as an asset in the bank as a negative form, kind of like a negative value of money, or otherwise known as debt. Under this system, debt is actually money. And if you say it's impossible to break
Honestly, I had no idea this was here when I pulled the bridge down. I just wanted to see what would happen. Like you and the cutter on Kashyyyk. Hey, BD, take a look. What's that, BD?
when we think about it. Well, this concept.
I haven't been.
The more loans are given out, the more money is created, and the more money in circulation is worth less and less as the years go on. This is known as inflation. In a way, inflation is basically a tax that we all pay for the fraud of money printing, in exchange for tax on our future generations. It's also why in 1950, an house used to cost $7,000 and a car $2 million. Obviously, this is no longer the same today. Things will always keep getting more expensive as long as this system is in place. It's actually kind of okay because wages grew in relation to inflation until about 2008. Why this stopped happening is a story for another day. So things are already pretty crazy, but they get even crazier. The more you look into it, the stranger things become. So remember how we're talking about how central banks and commercial banks can create money out of nothing? This procedure actually does create something. It creates debt. Let me explain. When you take out a loan, it's written down as an asset in the bank as a negative form, kind of like a negative value of money, or otherwise known as debt. Under this system, debt is actually money. Again, don't just listen to me. Marina Eccles, former governor of the Federal Reserve, states, quote, "If there were no debts in our money system, there wouldn't be any money." So in essence, instead of gold being the backbone of our economy, it's now debt. The system we're under now is sometimes referred to as the debt-based monetary system. It requires that debt always grows. Countries and people must become deeper in debt so that there's more money in the system. Because remember, debt is money. If people and governments stop borrowing money and pay back loans, the debt doesn't grow, the supply shrinks, and the system falters. The truly evil are we always in the system each and every day. The Federal Reserve and other central banks control money by adjusting its supply and how much it costs to borrow money, otherwise known as the interest rate. With these tools, and as a consequence of human group psychology, central banks can create booms and busts in the economy at will and also distort and derail an economy by messing with it. Let's take a quick case study. In the year 2000, Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan cut interest rates to 1%. He did this to try and fight off a recession from the dot-com bubble and encourage people to borrow money. When interest rates are low, if you borrow money, you save a whole lot on repaying mortgages. Since the 1% interest rate hadn't been set since the 1950s, it was a pretty good deal. Greenspan's idea was that he could create a wealth effect. People would start to buy houses, the prices would go up, and the people would feel wealthier and spend more money in the economy and stimulate it. Greenspan sure succeeded in getting people to buy houses, but they borrowed too much, and the result was the 2008 housing bubble. This is a prime example of what can go wrong when central banks mess with the economy. Yes, corrupt banks have a lot to answer for in the 2008 crisis. The Fed has far bigger long-term. Two things are happening in Japan. Their central bank is buying so many stocks. They were the number one buyer of Japanese stocks in 2016. So they have part ownership of companies with money that they created from nothing. So in essence, it is the central banks that control our economy and the central and commercial banking system together that control all of our money. The difference is central banks can create money at will, while commercial banks need loans to create money. To give you an idea of people's views of central banking when people actually knew what central banks were, here's a couple of examples. In 1881, then President of the United States, James Garfield, states, quote, Whoever controls the volume of money in any country is absolute master of all industry and commerce. And when you realize that the entire system is very easily controlled one way or another by a few powerful men at the top, you will not have to be told how periods of inflation and depression originate. End quote. Benjamin Franklin in his autobiography stated that the prime reason for the American War of Independence was a battle over who actually controlled and issued the money in colonies. He was a very long time. He was an economist who was free in the States. The Federal Reserve definitely the depression by contracting the amount of currency in circulation by 1/3 from 1929 to 1933. End quote. So with all this being said, some would argue that central banks are not inherently a bad thing. They just need to be part of the government and not part of the government. The government should be able to issue its own money for the benefit of the people and shouldn't have to pay a massive interest on its own debt. This was tried at least once in the United States by President Lincoln. He stated this:
The government should create, issue, and circulate all the currency and credit needed to satisfy the spending power of the government and the buying power of consumers. By the adoption of these principles, the taxpayers will be saved immense sums of interest. Money will cease to be master and become the student of humanity.
Abraham Lincoln then issued his own government money. It was called the greenback. No further comments on that story. So I think we'll end the video there. There's so much more that I could cover about all central banking decisions led to war revolutions around the world. Pretty much when you look at it, all revolutions and all wars, when you dig through everything, it all boils down to money. I could also have talked about the new global movement of those who are rejecting the debt-based economic system. People are starting to move their currency into gold or silver and cryptocurrencies, like Bitcoin. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. That's a whole other story for another day. Anyways, if you've watched the whole way through this video, congratulations. You're one of the few who have found out the hidden truths about who controls all of our money. I think I've only met about 4 people in real life that have been aware of the debt-based economic system. It's strangely unknown, but it's as true as anything. I even showed you all of the quotes of the bankers and the former heads of the Federal Reserve telling you from their own mouths how the system actually works. If this is your first time hearing all of this, I encourage you, as I said before, to do your own research, and you'll start to see a bigger picture, and the world today will make a whole lot more sense. If you want some good starting resources, I recommend Mike Maloney's Hidden Secrets of Money series. It's here on YouTube, and I'll leave it below. Mike is a very knowledgeable guy, and I've had some great long conversations with him about the economy. If you're into reading and you want to know more about the history of the Federal Reserve, I recommend the book by Geo Griffin, The Creature from Jekyll Island. I think I'll stop talking now. Thanks for watching this video. This has been Dagogo. You've been watching Cold Fusion. Feel free to subscribe.
All the data currencies that exist right now were born on August 15th of 1971 or later, because before that, all of the British pounds and all of the different currencies around the world were backed by gold through the U.S. dollar. So when Nixon severed the tie to gold, he changed. The U.S. dollar after August 15th was a completely different dollar than before August 15th, 1971. And if all the other world's currencies were backed by the U.S. dollar, that means all of the other currencies became unbacked on that date. And so we're in this grand experiment that has never been done before, where all of the world's currencies are fiat currencies simultaneously. This is new territory. This is a monetary experiment that is conducted on a scale never before seen. And we know that every time this experiment was conducted in the past, that currency would eventually fail and people would rush to other currencies and to gold. Well, now there's no other currency to run to. There is only gold and silver. And that's it.
If you want big paychecks, you've got to solve.
Do you remember the moment you realized that the world had changed? Let me tell you a quick little story that has nothing and everything to do with the future of our world and how you fit into it. In 1917, the United States faced a huge problem. They were working hard to compete in the industrialized economy, and there was a shortage. Not a shortage of oil or coal or other natural resources. A shortage of people, specifically obedient factory workers. The solution to this economic dilemma? It was an experiment of sorts. It hadn't been done before, until someone thought of it. Mandatory public school. Unfortunately, the initial purpose of the United States public school system was not to inspire children or generate scholars. And it wasn't created for dreamers, people who color outside the lines, break the rules, and challenge the status quo. The public school system of the early 1900s was invented to create a nation full of adults who would obediently do their jobs in the factory assembly line. Kids to sit in straight rows and scheduling the entire day for ringing a bell wasn't a chance. Punishing those who didn't conform was purposeful. These were the skills they would need to join the labor force. Intentional or not, this early method of turning humans into workers was an investment in the nation's economic future. And it worked. This led 7 generations of productive, fully employed workers. But it isn't working anymore. Why? Our economy has changed. We don't live in an industrialized economy anymore. We live in a connected economy. Right now, we have more people on Facebook than there were people on the planet 200 years ago. Technology has made it possible for us to connect with people, ideas, and information from anywhere in the world instantaneously. And as a result, our economy has expanded from local towns and communities to the entire world. We have globalized trade in nearly every way. In the past, the obedient, do-what-you're-told without question people were rewarded for working hard and putting their dreams aside in order to toe the line. They were given well-paid jobs that led to long-term careers. They were guaranteed pension benefits and the promise that they would always be taken care of. And they were. But that promise is gone for most of us today. Even if you have a white-collar job, the majority of white-collar workers are still working in a factory. Instead of operating a sewing machine or welding a widget, they now push pencils, type on keyboards, or process paperwork. It's still factory work because the entire focus of the day is spent on increasing productivity, which leaves little room for creativity, spontaneity, or individuality. The educated, hardworking masses are still doing what they're told, but they're no longer getting what they deserve. Even if you do everything you are told to do today, graduate from high school, go to college, get a degree, work hard in whatever job you can find, if you're lucky enough to find one, you're not guaranteed anything. Companies are being forced to change or die right now. Layoffs happen much more often than job openings appear, and the highest paying jobs are disappearing or heading overseas at an alarming rate. If you have a job where your boss tells you exactly what to do, he or she will always find someone cheaper than you to do it. Did you know that the average length of a job today is about 4.5 years? Contrast that to the 1960s when it was 40 years. The connected economy rewards a different group of people. It rewards the people who see things differently, who don't conform, people who have ideas that no one else has, people who are willing to work hard but know that the old way of doing things is broken. The connected economy rewards you not for being a cog in the wheel of life, but for standing up and reaching out. The connected economy rewards the connectors. Whether it's connecting a person to a person, a business to a business to a product, or a product to a person, those who learn how to connect are the ones who will survive and excel in the connected economy. That is how the world has changed. It's not about to change. It already has. Things are different now, and they're not going back to the way they used to be. Look at Facebook. What's their product? It's you. Your network, your information, your ideas, they all have value. Does Facebook pay you for the money they make selling your information to advertisers? No. But we still use it because we have an innate desire to connect with people. In fact, neuroscientists have found that we are actually hardwired to connect with each other. Some people know how to leverage this innate ability in today's economy, but most don't. And because they don't know how to do it, most of them are paralyzed with fear, resisting the shift, despite clear indications telling them it's time to change. In 1917, a group of people performed an experiment that forever changed the way that we earned a living. The world today is facing another huge problem. We're facing a shortage of our own. Not a shortage of factory workers or consumers. The world has enough of those. We have a shortage today of dreamers and connectors. And so, we're holding our own little experiment. And you happen to be the subject of it. This 8-minute presentation was specifically designed to seek out and find the connectors around us. Those who recognize that we are on the brink of the next economic revolution, who are ready to thrive in a connected economy, and who are searching for the best way to do it. The internet and technology are rapidly changing the way that we do everything today, including how we make a living. It's not too late to embrace the change and find a way to make yourself relevant and profitable in a brave new world. And that's why we've invited you here today. We've created something that rewards you for connecting. It pays you for bringing people together behind a cause, product, or idea. And we've systematized it and made it so that you can do it from anywhere, with anyone, at any time. If you are passionate about helping people, if you are passionate about changing lives, if you want to position yourself to be a capitalizing force within the connected revolution, instead of just a bystander, let's start now. Do you remember the moment you realized that the world had changed? How about the moment you realized you could change with it? Are you ready for the details?
Yes, Master?
Whoa.
And more big houses and more fancy cars. They were lifestyle. The poor could.
This training session will last as long as it needs. You will comprehend the lesson of the day, one way or another. Stay on task, Padawan. Good. We make our own luck. Do not keep me waiting. Hustle up, Cal. You're almost there.
and dark. What divides them is your state of mind. You can do this. Try again.
Whoa! Cheap shot, Commander.
Focus. Were you concentrating, you would have anticipated this distraction. Better, Padawan. Join me.
We'll begin with physical preparation. First, though, we have orders. Braca is secure. We move out from Aikito shortly.
Yes!
You must...
Master, are you okay?
Something is...
No! No! What's happening? Why did the commander just...
Padawan, something terrible is happening. The clones have betrayed us. There are no answers to your questions. Not yet. We need to get off this ship. Quickly. Get to the escape pods. Use the maintenance halls. We trained for this. Do you remember?
Yes, Master. What about you?
I will create a distraction and meet you. If I am not there when you arrive, depart without me. I will find you on Braca. Do you understand?
Yes, Master.
They're coming. I will seal the blast doors, but if any cross your path, do not hesitate. Go. And may the Force be with you. Go! Go!
There he is. Shoot to kill.
No, stop!
DePaul's on the move. We're gonna need backup.
Need to pull that to get through. This doesn't make any sense. What's going on?
Do we have eyes on the Jedi? No sign of the little one. Search everywhere. You can't have gone far. Airs off again. Wait. What's that noise? Hold this room. I'll search the area. Reporting casualties. DePaul has taken out multiple squads. Shoot on sight. Copy that.
I understand. What changed?
What was that? Someone's in the maintenance halls.
I think I'm near the turbo lift. Not much further after that.
I have eyes on the small Padawan. He's in the turbo lift.
I've got this. Just need to keep moving.
Padawan, your lightsaber!
Sorry, Master.
Keep climbing. I'll meet you up ahead. override just ahead. You must activate it if we're to escape.
Yes, Master.
We have to pull a pin in the airlock. Send backup. Cyrus's hole is on the other side of that door? Yeah, but he won't be getting through. It'll take him far too long to cut through these doors with that lightsaber. We'll just wait here until he's certain. What's that sound? Get ready!
Move, Padawan. We have to leave now. The door controls! Cal, hurry! I overloaded the ship's reactors. The explosion will mask our escape. This war is not over, my Padawan. Hold the line.
We have got to the point where literally
The Jedi Council signal. Remember, trust only in the Force.
Yes, Master.
Demon inside of them. Hello again, everybody. This is James Bartley, and you're listening to Bartley's Comments about Cosmic Lyrics. This could be called one of two things. The first is, oh, what a difference a few weeks ago. And two, this will be the working title. The pilots meet in the middle, and why? Why? The big question on a number of levels, all adding up to the big why. If what happened in East Palestine doesn't convince you surface level truthers that we're under alien attack, that this is a total, not just non-human attack on humans, but on all life, flora and fauna here on this planet. It's being totally re-engineered, terraformed, call it what you will. And the common denominator behind all of it is toxicity. Our planet is being made so toxic, not only for humans, with all the burdens and all the treatments that humans have been receiving lately, but also, again, the flora and the fauna. And we're talking down to the microbial levels of life. And the waters and oceans and streams of this world teeming with life. What's being done to them? Okay, we're talking about toxicity at mega planetary levels, which is part of this geoengineering, terraforming agenda. It's an alien agenda. I'll have more to say about that later. But within the context of the aliens, the reptilians in particular, doing this reptilian sphere of influence, the fundamental constants are changing. High energy is streaming in from the galactic core. And it may result in the reptilians not being able to hold their human form, at least the hybrid plantation managers. Some of them very high level in the reptilian hierarchical scheme of things, but still they're boots on the ground. Essentially, they're not gods. They're just politicians that lord it over you, basically, financiers, et cetera, et cetera. There may come a point in time when they're going to have extreme difficulty, and I think been going on, of holding their human form. So what they're going to do is what they're doing now. They get the whole blue beam thing going again. Balloons. Again, a reminder to Steve Martin, the jerk. The cans. Stay away from the cans. Neatly sidestepping all the voluminous evidence about aliens, UFOs, alien craft, disabling missile silos, et cetera, et cetera. All that has happened, and then some. But you get captivated, emotionally overwrought again, just by balloons. And And it's going to come a point in time, and no, actually we've reached that point in time, when people like myself, my colleagues, we're not in the fringe anymore. We're not even in the middle. We've been behind enemy lines at the start of this incarnation, if not previous ones. Not only that, but some of these UFO historian types, they fancy themselves UFO historians because they know all the dates, and they can, off the top of their head, talk about a certain government agency or whatever. But they have a limited perspective on what's going on. A lot of those UFO historian types, they won't even admit there's a new world order, world government, total takeover and deletion of all freedom. They're not even talking about that. They're just stuck in their own little paradigmatic box. And even ones that have a surface level sensibility that are familiar with UFO history, they would never go so far as to call out all the insane, evil BS that's going on constantly in front of them. Much too interested in making sure their next book is published or they get invited to do another TV show or whatever, right? I don't even consider them real historians because, A, like I just said, they don't have a wide-angle perspective on what's going on. Because I'm looking at it from the perspective of having read a lot of books from mainstream historians, mainstream biographers, mainstream military historians. Very few of them will stray beyond those parameters. And a lot of these UFO historian types, they're pretty much the same. And first of all, they've probably never had the experiences, but if they had the experiences that I'm talking about, alien abductions, Mila.
You saw something in there, didn't you? Something terrible.
All kinds of stuff. They've never probably had these experiences, and if they did, they'd never admit to it. So, right off the bat, their perspective on things is going to be limited. Again, Mullins, E.D. Morgan, and some of the others, what I consider great. We're not on the fringes anymore. We're not even in the middle. We've always been here. We've always been working deep behind cosmic enemy line, as boots in the ground. Tough job. Somebody had to do it. So, point being, point number one is,
yet here one stands, and you seek only to bring him into your family.
You were told to deal with it. Clearly you lack the power, little witch.
Power. You are mad, Maricos.
Tough job, somebody had to do it. So, point being, point number one is, if polluting the air, polluting the soil, making it so generations of kids, even if there are any future generations of humans, hybrid humans, even if they get that far, 2-3 generations down the line, they're likely going to be born with horrific mutations, like we saw with the Vietnam vets, and especially the Vietnamese people, the Laotian people, just people in general in Southeast Asia that were sandblasted by Agent Orange. And essentially, that main ingredient of Agent Orange, dioxin, has been utilized in a way, and then the gaslighting is 100% reptilian. Here's what you have to know about the reptilian species. Don't talk about the negative. They are extremely arrogant race. They are full of hubris. So, on the one hand, they may not be able to hold their human form, the hybrid plantation managers, because of the fundamental conscious change. Particles exhibiting, normally stable particles exhibiting faster rates of decay, things that are freaking out mainstream physicists. All this stuff streaming out of the sun and out of the galactic core, that's causing fundamental changes to us as well. But for the reptilians, it's causing them to, I believe, have an inability to hold their human shape, like plantation men, but also it's causing them to act even more erratic and harebrained, if you will, than normal. There's definitely a sense of panic and a sense of urgency in their operations working through, manifesting through their hybrid plantation managers. They're panicking, they're making a lot of mistakes, which can only benefit us. And the other side of the coin, two sides of the same coin, is the reptilian arrogance, because their hubris says to themselves, no, at some point, we're going to reveal ourselves. It's us, the reptilians. Ancients warned you about us all along, but you're too dense. We programmed you enough so you wouldn't believe it, right? We were your lords before, and we were your gods. We posed as all kinds of different gods all around the world and on many other worlds, right? That's going to be the message. It's going to be an act of utter hubris, chest-thumping, posturing. Go back and watch the, by now, classic old